Chapter 31. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Even when the golden light from the heavenly Tao gold list appeared above Wudang Mountain, showcasing all sorts of divine powers, Zhang Sanfeng remained unchanged. A blessing from heaven. Nearly 2 centuries have passed, and Zhang Sanfeng had reached a state of perfect tranquility. He might have regretted past desires, but now, he couldn't cling to them. It's all gone. Boom! The radiant glow of the heavenly Tao gold list flowed gently, heaven's blessing. 1. 1,000 years of life. 2. Improves the foundation of Wudang disciples and heals all injuries. 3. Tai Chi perfection. The majestic sound echoed through the sky, reaching everyone's ears. Suddenly, all of Kyushu was stunned. But, while just as shocked and envious as before, this time they felt perplexed. What about the girl? Everyone in Kyushu knew that Zhang Sanfeng's biggest regret was the girl named Guxiang. Yet now, with this heavenly blessing, there wasn't a single mention of her. What's going on? Everyone was dumbfounded. In reality, this time the blessing was incredibly generous. 1,000 years of life? No dynasty in the entire Kyushu continent had a national destiny lasting 1,000 years. And this blessing bestowed 1,000 years of life. What's more, Zhang Sanfeng's original lifespan was already beyond the reach of ordinary people. He'd likely become a living history book in Kyushu. Plus, improving the foundation and healing injuries was plenty inspiring. This applied to the entire Wu-Tang clan, not just a person or two. And that perfect Tai Chi, these were incredible rewards. Still, everyone was puzzled. Why didn't the girl Zhang Sanfeng couldn't forget appear? De Qin, Yingyun paused, a thoughtful expression on his face. He, too, was puzzled. He murmured. Heavenly blessings are supposed to fulfill regrets. But why the change now? His gaze turned to Yingyun, a hint of inquiry in his eyes. Yingyun had been the first to offer insights into these heavenly blessings. Yingyun wanted to hear the thoughts of this seemingly lazy but undeniably clever guy. Well. Seeing Yingyun's gaze, Yingyun looked helpless. He pointed at the seemingly unfazed Zhang Sanfeng in the gold list image. There. This Sanfeng has let it go. It's no longer a regret. Yingyun was a little moved. Truly a great master. His mental fortitude probably surpassed everyone else in the 9 provinces. When it came to fighting, Yingyun felt he could beat Zhang Sanfeng with one hand tied behind his back. But in terms of inner peace, he was humbled. Though, Yingyun didn't see a problem with that. Seeing through the world and reaching a state of indifference might not be so great. Playing in the world, flirting with maids, that was a life worth living. Of course, it was unclear if Zhang Sanfeng, who had spent hundreds of years alone studying Tai Chi, found similar pleasures. He's let it go. Yingyun was taken aback. He looked at Zhang Sanfeng, who was still holding the iron arhats, gazing ahead quietly. Perhaps, preserving the memory of that innocent era was more important to Zhang Sanfeng than erasing the regret. Wu-Tang clan. As the heavenly Tao gold list's image faded, Wudang Mountain, once quiet and remote, was suddenly overrun by people. The most distinguished was Zhao Kuan-yin, the founding emperor of the Song Dynasty, wearing his yellow robe. To prevent Zhang Sanfeng from being snatched away by other dynasties, he had come in person. The entire Jiuzhou also noticed through the gold list image that one of the envoys was an emperor. The emperor of one of the 5 supreme dynasties. For a moment, everyone pondering the blessing was stunned. When they finally processed this, they cursed Zhao Kuan-yin for his shamelessness. Wudang Mountain belonged to the Song Dynasty. But now, the Song Dynasty's emperor was there in person. Zhang Sanfeng would have to give him face. Compared to the emperor, the other envoys were insignificant. Zhao Kuan-yin might actually succeed, right? Thinking this, the emperors panicked. A grandmaster? The heavenly Tao gold list didn't show Zhang Sanfeng's combat prowess much, but him defeating grandmasters like they were common bandits showed he was powerful. If Zhao Kuan-yin recruited Zhang Sanfeng, the dynasties close to the Song dynasty were in trouble. No. They had to do something. Watching Zhao Kuanyin happily ascend Mount Wudong, the emperors came up with an idea. They couldn't let Zhao Kuanyin snag this grandmaster. They had to fight back. Chapter 37, 5th on the Peerless list. Why is it a little familiar? Everyone in Zhozhou wondered why Guoxiang hadn't appeared after the blessing. Some, wise beyond their years, guessed based on Zhang Sanfeng's expression. But that wasn't the focus. No one expected Zhao Kuanyin to invite Zhang Sanfeng in person as an emperor. A total power move. They remembered when Li Shimin invited Yuan Tiangang. The other dynasties couldn't compete. But Jingcheng and Chang'an were right next to each other. Li Shimin found a master in his backyard. But Zhao Kuanyin's capital was hundreds of miles from Wudong Mountain, across mountains and rivers. How long had it been? Did Zhao Kuanyin fly there? It was almost as everyone guessed. To reach Wudong Mountain before the gold list ended, Zhao Kuanyin abandoned the ceremonial guard and had his best warrior take him. His warrior could travel 1,000 miles a day. That was how Zhao Kuanyin arrived at Wudong Mountain. After arriving, Zhao Kuanyin fixed his appearance and hurried to meet Zhang Sanfeng. The emperors were angered. But they couldn't do anything. Zhao Kuanyin had arrived, guarded by a master. Even if something happened, Zhang Sanfeng wouldn't stand by. Everyone could only watch, unable to stop it. Soon, led by the 7 heroes of Wudong, Zhao Kuanyin met Zhang Sanfeng. Surprisingly, Zhang Sanfeng declined Zhao Kuanyin's promises of titles, positions, gold, silver, jewelry, and even secret texts. Think about it, with Zhang Sanfeng's power, he could have easily achieved all that when he broke through to Grandmaster hundreds of years ago, but he had chosen a different path. Now, he had almost seen through everything. But Zhang Sanfeng agreed to Zhao Kuanyin's request. If the Song dynasty faced national destruction, he would act. Zhao Kuanyin was regretful, but knew that a grandmaster couldn't be forced. So, he left the secret texts as a bribe and left. Phew, that the emperors breathed a sigh of relief. As long as Zhang Sanfeng didn't agree, it was all good. Everyone saw Zhang Sanfeng's character through that scene. He couldn't be bought with fame and fortune. So, after a moment, the emperors sent more envoys with treasures to befriend him. They needed a good relationship with a grandmaster. Chapter 32. You are listening at novelfull.audio. At the same time, other dynasties that had been considering making a move against the Song dynasty reconsidered. Even though the Song dynasty prioritized culture over military might, its strength was still substantial. But now, with a Grand Master's backing, things were different. And not just any Grand Master, but one with a lifespan exceeding 1,000 years. The Song dynasty might become truly unassailable. They could potentially secure their dynasty for millennia. Therefore, several dynasties that were nearly on par with the supreme dynasties and had planned to challenge the Song dynasty for a piece of Kyushu, had a change of heart. A powerful Grand Master might not decide the outcome of every war, but their assassination skills were something no one could easily dismiss. Then, Zhao Kuanyin realized that several dynasties that had been eyeing his territory were suddenly sending envoys to establish diplomatic relations. A total win. Zhao Kuanyin was completely satisfied with his previous actions. If he hadn't made that decisive trip to Wudong Mountain himself, how could he have earned the Grand Master's favor? Meanwhile, in Qin. Recruiting Grand Master level experts is getting tougher. Dingzheng watched the image on the Dao Gold list, his eyes darkening with a hint of contemplation. This peerless list had already highlighted 5 formidable figures, but only Gai Nie was in Qin, and only Yuan Tiangang had joined Great Tang. The rest had either vanished or made it clear they weren't interested in serving any dynasty. Even Zhang Sanfeng only promised to intervene if the Song dynasty faced imminent collapse. These masters are used to freedom and independence, they don't want to be tied down by any dynasty, Gai Nie said, cutting to the heart of the matter. Indeed. Yingyun nodded, aware of the difficulty in recruiting such powerful individuals. I'm becoming increasingly curious about the identity of the fifth person on the peerless list. Yingyun said as the images on the Dao Golden List began to fade, revealing glimpses of other scenes. The sixth-ranked individual was already a Grand Master. What kind of power did someone higher possess? Surely, at least a Grand Master, right? Send out orders. No matter where the fifth-ranked master on the peerless list is from, we must establish a good relationship. Yingyun turned to his civil and military officials, adding, as for recruitment, try your best, but don't force it. Previously, Yingyun would have been eager to recruit Grand Masters, but after encountering these exceptional individuals on the peerless list, he had begun to reconsider. Such beings were invincible in their own right, transcending martial arts and dynastic constraints. Simply being on good terms would yield immense benefits. Not only Yingyun, but other emperors of the supreme dynasties had realized this as well. After some deliberation, they issued similar orders. If recruitment failed, building a good relationship was the next best thing, right? The supreme dynasties weren't pushovers either. If pushed to the brink, they could deploy their armies regardless of the potential assassinations by Grand Masters. Who could stop them then? As countless dynasties in Kyushu shifted their strategies, the image on the heavenly Dao Golden List flickered and changed. The picture began to flow, displaying new scenes. What's that? As the image stabilized and its true landscape was revealed, everyone was stunned. It looked familiar. Chapter 38, Another Handyman Disciple. All of Kyushu was confused. The picture above the void showed an ancient temple. Predictably, it was the base of the fifth figure on the peerless list. Normally, this would be unremarkable. After all, it made perfect sense for someone of that stature to establish a force. But the problem was, the location looked incredibly familiar. Hadn't they seen it recently? In Qin. That looks like Shaolin Temple. Yingyun frowned, murmuring to himself, not long ago, Zhang Junbao had spent several years in that very Shaolin Temple. Although their appearance on the Tiandao Golden List was brief, fleeting. Everyone knew the layout of Shaolin Temple. Wasn't that clearing the very spot where Zhang Sanfeng had defeated the three saints of Kunlun using Arhat Fist? In the Han Dynasty, Changle Palace. Could the fifth person on the peerless list also be from Shaolin? Lu Bang watched the picture on the gold list, his heart pounding as he blurted out, Shaolin Temple. It was a powerful force in the martial arts world. But to have two Grand Master level figures emerge from there seemed unbelievable. In Daming, Forbidden City. Songshan Shaolin, that's a good place. Zhu Yuanzhang smacked his lips, thinking back to his days as a bull-carrying monk. Back then, I tried out, but unfortunately, I wasn't selected. I couldn't even become a monk. Zhu Yuanzhang recalled his attempts to join Shaolin Temple. In his younger days, the monks who entered Shaolin Temple were glamorous and enviable. Even the disciples who did odd jobs had no worries about food or drink. Unfortunately, things didn't go according to plan. He put in a lot of effort but didn't become a Shaolin monk. In desperation, he rose up and became the emperor. If Shaolin Temple had accepted him as a disciple, there probably wouldn't be a Ming dynasty today. Watching his father drift into memories, Zhu Di frowned, fearing Zhu Yuanzhang would say something shocking about becoming a monk again. Zhu Yuanzhang had a history of doing so. Once, just to drink a bowl of the so-called pearl jade cabbage soup, he threw the entire Forbidden City into chaos. In the end, all the civil and military officials, along with the princes and grandchildren, had to hold their noses and drink a bowl of slightly rotten cabbage soup. The taste, even after several years, still made Zhu Di shudder. It was too hard to swallow. Even so, his father praised it to everyone, declaring it the most delicious food in the world. And he couldn't argue. It was too much. In the Tang Dynasty, Li Shimin took a deep breath, staring intently at the picture on the Tiandao Golden List, afraid to miss anything. The emergence of a Grand Master had truly impacted the situation in Kyushu. If such a being joined a weaker dynasty, it would instantly give them the ability to compete with the supreme dynasties. And if a Grand Master joined one of the 5 supreme dynasties, it would be terrible news for the other 4. Among the 5 supreme dynasties, only the Song dynasty, which prioritized culture over military matters, was slightly weaker. The other 4 were roughly equal in strength. A Grand Master's combat power participating in dynastic hegemony could be the final straw that broke the camel's back. Even the supreme dynasties couldn't afford such a price. Therefore, Li Shimin couldn't allow the top 5 on the peerless list to join any dynasty, especially a supreme dynasty. And if they did, they had to join the Tang dynasty. In the Song dynasty, compared to the other major dynasties, Zhao Kuangyin was much more relaxed. He was lucky enough to have the Grand Master within his territory. As a citizen of the Song dynasty, Zhang Sanfeng had to show respect to the emperor. So happy. But Shaolin Temple was also in his territory. Suddenly, as if struck by an idea, Zhao Kuangyin's eyes flashed, a hint of excitement in his heart. Should he visit Shaolin Temple again? But he'd already exploited a loophole once, walking on a tightrope and making the major countries nervous. If he did it again, it might cause a real disaster. These dynasties might not directly send troops to the Song dynasty, but cutting off commercial exchanges would be enough to make Zhao Kuangyin suffer. The Song dynasty valued culture over military affairs, and commerce was extremely developed. Losing such a source of revenue wouldn't be a good thing. Chapter 33. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Moreover, now that I've got a lead on a serious master, there's no need to rush into anything. Still, I'm going to play it by ear. I mean, not every master is going to be like Zhang Sanfeng, right? A truly respected legend. What if I end up with some cranky old geezer? That could be a disaster. Meanwhile, all over Kyushu, dynasties are buzzing with speculation, and the Heavenly Tao Golden List keeps rolling. Finally, it lands on 3 words, Shaolin Temple. The picture flashes, showing a scene everyone knows well. The Tibetan Scripture Pavilion. Remember Zhang Junbao, the kid who swept floors there for years? Seeing the Sutra Pavilion again feels surreal, like stepping into another dimension. I half expect the familiar kid to show up on the steps, hauling buckets of water, but nope, that's not happening. Instead, the scene zooms deeper into the Sutra Pavilion, into the areas Zhang Junbao, as a handyman, never got to see. Then, an old monk, dressed in similar rags to Zhang Junbao, shuffles into view. Another freaking handyman? Seriously? The whole of Zhuzhou is in shock, glued to the Tiandao Golden List. What is it with Shaolin Temple? Are they breeding masters among the janitors? While Kyushu is losing its collective mind, the monks at Shaolin are just standing there, mouths agape, staring at the Heavenly Tao Golden List. Before all this, the Shaolin monks were feeling some serious regrets about the Zhang Sanfeng fiasco. They pretty much knew what was up. Plus, the monks who gave Zhang Junbao the boot are all pushing up daisies now, so, bygones, right? After a few hundred years, who's still holding grudges? But now the question is, when did the Sutra Pavilion get another master? Wait a minute. Aren't Shaolin disciples forbidden from wandering deep into the Sutra Pavilion? How'd a monk end up back there? No way. Chapter 39, Is the Sweeping Monk a Great Master? Shaolin just hit the jackpot. There he is, an old monk in the Shaolin Sutra Pavilion. He looks ancient. Dressed in a Shaolin disciple's robe, he's sweeping the floor. His long, scraggly beard is completely white. If it wasn't for the fact that the Heavenly Tao Golden List is never wrong, everyone would assume he's just a regular old sweeper. But the Heavenly Tao Golden List doesn't make mistakes. Even if it did, all of Kyushu would be wrong. Dongfang Bubi's situation proves it, so when the Tiandao Golden List reveals something, nobody in the 9 provinces questions it. Amitba, just as everyone is freaking out, the old monk seems to sense something. He glances up and murmurs a Buddhist blessing. Then, he sets down the broom, slowly shuffles out from the depths of the Sutra Pavilion, and finally looks at the scene above. There's a hint of wistfulness in his eyes. At this moment, Shaolin Temple is packed. Almost every monk has come outside. Seeing the old monk emerge from the Sutra Pavilion, they're all spooked, but too intimidated to approach him. in their minds, this guy has to be a grandmaster-level powerhouse. Sure, he's dressed like a regular monk in the temple. But he's been hidden away in the Sutra Pavilion for who knows how long. Nobody even noticed. That alone is enough to send shivers down Shaolin's spine. I mean, how important is the Sutra Pavilion to Shaolin Temple? Only Shaolin abbots and a handful of others are allowed into the deepest parts, and not even those guys realized how strong this monk was. Amitabha. I mean no harm. Looking at the massive gathering of Shaolin monks, the old monk steps forward, offers a Buddhist salute, and says, I just wanted to find a quiet place to hide away for a while. I didn't realize 40 years had flown by. Sorry for any trouble I caused. The calm, even voice echoes in Shaolin Temple and booms across the 9 states through the heavenly Tao Golden List. Everyone is stunned. He's been hiding in Shaolin Temple for over 40 years, and nobody knew. Seriously? Shaolin Temple isn't some backwater dojo. It's famous, with a ton of powerful masters, and over 40 years, things have changed. Some old masters had to have sniffed him out, right? The fact that nobody noticed this sweeping monk is mind-boggling. While the rest of Kyushu is in shock, the monks at Shaolin are completely baffled. The Sutra Pavilion, Shaolin's most guarded treasure, has been occupied by an old monk for 40 years, and nobody knew a damn thing about it. The Shaolin monks are speechless. They want to say that Shaolin techniques are sacred and cannot be taught to outsiders, but considering how outmatched they are, they just hang their heads, not daring to utter a word. Forgive him. Even if they didn't, what could they do about it? Fight him? Hunt him down like they did Zhang Junbao? Don't be ridiculous. They're monks, not idiots. If they actually tried to punish him, Shaolin Temple would be wiped off the map. It is an honor to have a senior like you grace Shaolin with your presence. After a long silence, Shaolin Abbot Master Xuanzi returns the Buddhist salute and says, with a forced smile, I hope the senior will share his wisdom and guide us in the future. The abbot has finally woken up. When you find yourself next to a grandmaster-level leg, you grab onto it and don't let go. Sure, this scene will be broadcasted across Jojo through the heavenly Tao Golden List, making Shaolin lose some face. But is that really a big deal, compared to a grandmaster? Not at all. If the abbot asks, I will do my best. Hearing this, the sweeping monk nods casually and replies without emotion, since he's been squatting in Shaolin territory, the least he can do is recite some scriptures. Shameless. Watching this scene, everyone in Jojo is spitting venom, filled with contempt for Shaolin Temple. Really? You see a grandmaster, and you start sucking up immediately. What happened to the Shaolin Code, no passing on of our martial arts to outsiders? What happened to sending a bunch of monks to hunt down Zhang Sanfeng? Pathetic. The whole of Jojo now understands just how sleazy Shaolin Temple is. They used to think that these Shaolin monks were just sticklers for rules and couldn't see the forest for the trees. But turns out, they can pivot pretty damn fast. They'll grovel before a grandmaster, but come down hard on a young nobody like Zhang Junbao. Seriously. But while everyone has a massive amount of contempt for the Shaolin monks, they have to admit that this grandmaster is worth envying. They thought it was outrageous enough that someone like Li Shimin could just sit around and a grandmaster would drop from the sky. But now, this is even more ridiculous. Some Shaolin monk just stumbles upon a grandmaster. Envy. Looking at the old monk surrounded by monks in the picture, countless people can barely contain their jealousy. Boom. Just when the whole of Jojo is reeling from Shaolin Temple's unbelievable luck, the heavenly Tao Golden List shimmers, and a vast aura flows, gradually condensing into a new scene above the void. At the same time, a magnificent voice booms across the land. Chapter 34. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Fifth on the Peerless list, the sweeping monk, nameless. Realm, Grand Master. Achievements, fought 4 Grandmasters single-handedly. The fifth on the Peerless list, the sweeping monk, nameless. Really? Everyone was stunned. Everyone has a name, right? So why sweeping monk instead of his actual name? But the confusion didn't last. The image on the golden list flickered and became clearer. It looked like a temple, but it was nowhere near the size of Shaolin Temple, or even famous temples like Famen Temple, White Horse Temple, and Yingyun Temple. This was just a tiny temple, the kind that barely gets any visitors, and in that temple, a young monk was chanting and tapping a wooden fish. Chapter 40. At Qingshan Temple. A young monk takes refuge. Qingshan Temple, the ancient bell chimed, mixing with the wooden fish and the distant sounds of monks practicing martial arts, creating a peaceful scene. Among the monks was a young one with a handsome face and a calm demeanor. The Bodhisattva Avalokiteshvara, practicing the profound perfection of wisdom, saw that the five aggregates are empty and transcended all suffering. Shariputra, form does not differ from emptiness, emptiness does not differ from form. Form is emptiness, emptiness is form. He chanted slowly, tapping the wooden fish gently. Even those who didn't understand Buddhism could feel the truth in the words. It was captivating, but for the old monk steeped in Buddhist teachings, it was shocking. He was simply reciting sutras, but the way he did it resonated with core Buddhist principles. It was as if Buddha himself was reincarnated. This young novice will definitely become a great monk. That thought echoed in countless minds across the land. Zhang Sanfeng was a reserved young man who built his skills over time, but this young novice monk was a real prodigy. Even born in a small place like Qingshan Temple, his brilliance couldn't be hidden. Could this be what the sweeping monk was like as a kid? Subconsciously, they pictured the old, weathered figure, and a slight jolt went through them. Then, the two images began to overlap. There really was a resemblance. As everyone pondered, the image shifted, and a cheerful voice broke through the silence. "Little monk, I'm back." That the voice was soft, filled with eager little footsteps, and the unconcealed joy of the visitor. Soon, a cute girl with a sweet face appeared on the screen. She was beautiful, pure and untouched. Her light blue dress flowed around her, making her stunning to look at. Feelings, thoughts, actions, and consciousness are also like this. The young novice monk continued chanting, unfazed by the girl's voice, but everyone noticed that his hand paused on the wooden fish for a split second. Even if it was subtle, with so many powerful figures in the land, they could see through the heart of a little monk who had barely left the temple. In Qin. "This young monk and this girl have something special," Yingyun murmured, watching the image. "A pity. The strict rules of Buddhism. I hope they find happiness." Though the Qin Dynasty restricted Buddhism, Yingyun understood its profound influence. So, Yingyun was taken aback. The sweeping monk had a past like this. To Yingyun, the sweeping monk was a complete enigma. What was his real name? Why had he stayed in the Shaolin Temple's Sutra Collection Pavilion for over 40 years? No one knew. In the Big Man Kingdom. Qingshan Temple. The Golden List doesn't give us much to work with. If we could find it, we could befriend a great master. Lu Bang said, focused on the sweeping monk. There was no doubt about his strength. Winning his loyalty would be ideal. In Daming, the Tang Dynasty, and other kingdoms, emperors stared at the Golden List, deep in thought. Some wanted to find Qingshan Temple and forge an alliance with the great master. But they were mostly eager to see what would happen next. After all, they knew the rules of Buddhism. Love was a luxury for Buddhist disciples. The picture flowed on. "Little monk, why do you ignore me?" the girl asked again, playfully. "My father took me hunting, and we caught a little rabbit." It was clear that time was passing. The girl's clothes changed. In moments, years went by. The little monk kept chanting. "Form is emptiness, emptiness is form. Shariputra, all dharmas are empty of form, neither born nor destroyed, neither dirty nor clean, neither increasing nor decreasing." His strikes on the wooden fish became more measured, elongated. His understanding of Buddhist teachings deepened, but the monk never set foot in the martial arts. He simply chanted. Some monks felt this was a waste of talent. If he didn't start training soon, it would be too late, but the little monk kept chanting, just like before. Every so often, the girl visited and shared stories, never tiring of it. Her name was Kyushu. A delicate name. The little monk seemed used to her. Though still chanting and tapping the wooden fish, a faint smile appeared whenever Kyushu arrived. Sometimes, he would even stop chanting to comment on her stories, and that always made the girl laugh. "Little monk, tell me a story, that when the girl finished a particularly interesting story, the little monk smiled faintly, grabbed the wooden fish, and said with a pout, tell me one, the soft voice echoed in the image. Everyone was stunned, the girl was usually the one talking and the monk listening. Okay, looking at her expectant face, the little monk paused, nodded, and said softly, I'll tell you about the 3 refuges that my master taught me. Once upon a time, there was an old monk. Chapter 35. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 41, 4 Refuges. Little monk, I'm getting married. There was this old monk, right? He kept getting robbed. It got so bad, he couldn't take it anymore. So one day, the thief shows up again. The monk tells him, hey, stick your hand through the door crack. Whatever you want, I'll give it to you. The thief's stoked to hear this, so he sticks his hand in. But bam. The old monk grabs him, ties his hand to a pillar, and starts wailing on him with a stick. While the monk's beating him, he's yelling, I take refuge in the Buddha. I take refuge in the Dharma. I take refuge in the Sangha. The thief's screaming in pain, so he starts yelling too, I take refuge in the Buddha. I take refuge in the Dharma. I take refuge in the Sangha. Refuge in Buddha. Refuge in Dharma. Refuge in the monks. That soft voice trickled out of the little monk's mouth, filled with peace and a sense of timelessness. Take refuge in the Buddha, take refuge in the Dharma, take refuge in the Sangha, the 3 refuges. Pretty much everyone in Kyushu has heard some version of the 3 refuges story. This one's just a quickie about a thief who found Buddhism because of it, and get this, at the end, the thief becomes the old monk's disciple. The reason's pretty simple. The thief got the 3 refuges beat into him and decided Sakyamuni Buddha was super wise and compassionate. He figured the Buddha must have known he'd get caught, so he invented the 3 refuges in the first place. He thought, if he tried to take 6 refuges, he'd be beaten to a pulp. So, after he healed up, the little thief decided to become the old monk's disciple and study Buddhism. Consider it going straight. Giggle. The girl's silvery laughter bubbled out as the little monk finished his story. That little thief is such an idiot. After laughing for a good while, the girl looks at the young monk, totally serious, and says, how'd Buddha know he was getting beaten? And that old monk got robbed blind. How's he gonna afford to feed a thief? Giggle, this story's bogus. The girl was beaming, gorgeous enough to stop traffic. Yeah, and the young monk, for once, doesn't argue. He just nods seriously and says, that little thief really is an idiot. Questioning Buddhism. Usually, no matter what stories were in the Buddhist scriptures, the young monk would never have contradicted them, but this time, he nodded. Hey, little monk, can I tell you a story too? The young monk looked a little bummed and seemed lost in thought. The girl suddenly stepped closer, her cheeks a little flushed, and asked him. Sure. The young monk subconsciously took a step back, then nodded slightly. Go ahead. For some reason, looking at the girl in front of him, the little monk's heart, usually so calm, started to race a little. I'll tell you a story about the 4 refuges. The girl smiled sweetly and said with a mischievous glint in her eye, seeing the little monk lower his head. 4 refuges. The young monk looked baffled, a flicker of confusion crossing his face. What are the 4 refuges? He searched his memory, rifling through Buddhist scriptures, but he couldn't find any mention of the 4 refuges. A little disappointment washed over him. Just listen. Seeing the young monk looking so lost, the girl leaned in and whispered. Once upon a time, there was this old monk who kept getting robbed. One day, the thief shows up again. The monk tells him, hey, stick your hand through the door crack. Whatever you want, I'll give it to you. Isn't that the story of the 3 refuges? The young monk couldn't help but interrupt her, blurting out his question, isn't that exactly the same as the story I just told? Hey, don't interrupt. The girl huffed, seeing the doubt in the young monk's clear eyes, and continued. The thief's stoked to hear this, so he sticks his hand in. But bam. The old monk grabs him, ties his hand to a pillar, and starts wailing on him with a stick. While the monk's beating him, he's yelling, "I take refuge in the Buddha. I take refuge in the Dharma. I take refuge in the Sangha. I take refuge in the Sangha." The girl stopped dead. Take refuge in what? That the young monk was curious now, his eyes wide. He couldn't help but ask, for refuges. Take refuge in the Buddha, take refuge in the Dharma, take refuge in the Sangha, what else is there? Give me your hand. The girl smiled, took his hand, and wrote on his palm, reading aloud as she wrote. Take refuge in the Buddha. Take refuge in the Dharma. Take refuge in the Sangha. Take refuge in Miss Shio. She finished by writing the word Shio on his palm. In the Buddhist temple, the young monk stood there dumbfounded. The clear sound of prajna drifted by like the wind, everything seemed still. Take refuge. He mumbled, wanting to say the for refuges, but he just froze, his mouth twitching slightly, the words never coming out. Say it. Take refuge, in what? The girl looked at the stunned little monk, smiling, a spark of expectation in her eyes, and urged him softly. Take refuge. Take refuge in the Buddha, take refuge in the Dharma, take refuge in the Sangha, take refuge in Amitabha. That the young monk, flustered by her gaze, looked away, clasped his hands together, recited a Buddhist verse, and practically bolted out of there. The girl was left alone, staring blankly at the little monk's retreating figure, tears welled up in her eyes, slowly trickling down. After that, the young monk didn't see Miss Shio for a long time. He kept banging on his wooden fish and chanting sutras as usual. But everyone could hear that his voice was flat, mechanical, devoid of any real feeling. In the distance, the young monk's master, the old monk, watched it all unfold and sighed softly, but didn't say a word. 3 months crawled by, the young monk had clearly lost a lot of weight. He wasn't nearly as lively as he used to be, and then, Miss Shio finally showed up. The little monk was overjoyed. He rushed to the mountain gate to greet her, even dropping the wooden fish he always treasured and never left without. Right now, nothing was more important than seeing Miss Shio. Qingshan Temple, the little monk saw the girl again, but before he could even say hello, the girl gave him a sad smile, touched his gaunt cheek, and said softly. Little monk, I'm getting married. I won't be able to tell you any more stories. Her words hit him like a ton of bricks, freezing him in place. You're getting married. Yeah. It's time for you to get married too, that he mumbled in a daze, half to himself, half, lost in silence. Chapter 42, A Love Lost. Showgirl is dead. Little monk, I'm getting married. That the faint voice echoed on the heavenly Tao golden list, barely audible, but it sent shivers down everyone's spines. Who hasn't seen how the girl feels after all this time? But how can a little monk break his Buddhist vows? Not just him, but even the most enlightened monk in Jojo today can't escape those strict rules. For a moment, everyone looked at the little monk on the screen, with pity in their eyes. Chapter 36. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Okay, so this little monk is probably going to be a super powerful Grand Master someday. But right now, he's just a kid. Ami. Buddha, well, congrats to you, sir. On the screen, the young monk looked a little pale. He took a deep breath, bowed his head, gave a Buddhist salute, and spoke slowly. You could tell he was confused, a little reluctant, a little sad. But when he faced the girl, he hid it all. Congrats. That the girl's eyes dimmed. She hesitated, then stepped forward and stared at the little monk's eyes, avoiding hers, and said clearly. Little monk, will you marry me? That there was urgency, nervousness, and determination in her voice. A gentle breeze rippled. The little monk was stunned. Did he want to? He almost blurted something out, but he remembered his master's teachings and stopped himself. Form is emptiness, emptiness is form. Feeling, thinking, actions and awareness are all like this. Relics, the 5 aggregates are all empty. He silently recited scriptures, but the Prajnaparamita Heart Sutra, which he'd recited 1,000 times, felt unfamiliar. He stumbled, making mistakes. "Do you want to?" Looking at the young monk reciting scriptures with his head down, the girl stepped closer, almost face to face, and asked again. A delicate fragrance swirled around the little monk's nose, startling him and almost making him lose himself. "Amitba, I'm just a monk," but he sighed, slowly turned his back to the girl, and said. "Destiny rises and falls, and eventually scatters. Please, take care of yourself." The young monk knew girls would eventually marry. He was just a monk who chanted sutras and recited Buddha's name, unable to protect her. If she found someone she loved, he would be relieved, right? Relics, all dharmas are empty, neither born nor destroyed, neither stained nor pure, neither increasing nor decreasing. That is why there are 5 colors in the sky. He continued chanting, leaving the girl standing there as he walked up the stairs toward Qingshan Temple. He didn't know she was crying. "Little monk, I'm back. Little monk, can I tell you a story?" The 4 refuges. Take refuge in the Buddha, take refuge in the Dharma, take refuge in the Sangha, take refuge in Miss Shio. The faint voice echoed on the heavenly Tao golden list, stretching out. De Qin. Can't have it. Another love story. Watching the scene, Yingyun sighed, a trace of sadness on his face, and he murmured. This little monk grew up in Qingshan Temple. Buddhist precepts are everything to him. The girl's love is deep, but she comes from a wealthy family. Some things can't be avoided. This was doomed. The Tiandao gold list didn't reveal much about the girl, but as an emperor, Yingyun could guess a lot from her background. They loved each other, but couldn't be together. I wonder what their ending will be. In the Forbidden City, Zhu Yuanzhang looked at the picture and thought of his past. A solemn look crossed his face, and he murmured. Buddhist rules are harmful. Zhu Yuanzhang was from a humble background and was forced to become a monk when he was young. He knew the regulations of Buddhism. Even without the love part, Zhu Yuanzhang had been silently cursing Sakyamuni for years just for not being allowed to eat meat. Now, seeing the ending of the young monk and the girl, the resentment resurfaced. He wondered if he should imitate Yingyun and kick all the monks out of the Ming Dynasty. A group of monks just made him uncomfortable. Well, seeing his father muttering, a hint of murderous intent in his eyes, Zhu Di was shocked and secretly prayed that Zhu Yuanzhang wouldn't do anything stupid. Buddhism. Its strength wasn't much to many dynasties. But its followers were everywhere. Offending them would cause unimaginable chaos. Even the Ming Dynasty couldn't handle that big man. Song Dynasty. At this moment, many dynasties watched the scene on the golden list and witnessed the love between the young monk and the girl. The scene flashed across the sky, and some time passed. The girl was gone. 1 day, 2 days, 1 month, 2 months, half a year passed in a blink. The little monk's life was back on track. He chanted sutras every day, and his dharma grew stronger quickly. Even the old monks in the temple couldn't compare to him in terms of Buddhism. Enlightened monks were shocked by his profound teachings. But the little monk still recited scriptures and hit the wooden fish every day, unchanged, but every time he took a break, he would stare at the temple entrance, and the quirky girl would appear in his mind, wanting to tell him strange stories, and she would bother him to tell a story, the story of the 4 refuges. Just when everyone thought he would practice and forget the quirky girl and become a respected monk, the unexpected happened. The sky was gloomy, a storm coming. A dignified, sorrowful middle-aged man came to Qingshan Temple and asked to see the little monk, and told him bad news. Miss Shio, dead. Chapter 43 Fate and Destiny. The 4 refuges. Refuge in Miss Shio, dead. When the middle-aged man said the bad news with a sad face, not only the little monk was stunned. Everyone was confused. She was fine 6 months ago, and now she's dead. What happened? Everyone wondered. They wanted to know what was going on. The picture of the heavenly Tao golden list slowly flowed. The dignified man was the prince of a small dynasty. And the girl was a princess. It wasn't much in Jojo. But in that small Qingshan temple, it was shocking. The little monk didn't react, just stood there stunned. His eyes went dark after hearing the news. Qi Xiu had a terminal illness. Before she died, she kept thinking about Qingshan Temple and asked me to come here. Qi Xiu's father sighed and explained. He glanced at the little monk standing there blankly. Seeing his dull eyes, he shook his head and smiled sadly. This was the little monk his daughter loved. Just an ordinary monk. Qi Xiu's father turned to arrange his daughter's funeral. How did she die? A hoarse voice echoed in the temple, a hint of suppressed madness, saying. I took her pulse before. She had no hidden disease. It's impossible for her to die in half a year. Chapter 37. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Now, after years of training, the young monk wasn't just a master of Buddhism, he knew a thing or two about medicine as well. Could it be he didn't believe Miss Xiu died of some illness? Did he want to know what really happened to her? What does it matter how she died? Qi Xiu's father, looking at the young monk's fierce expression, gave a bitter laugh. I just did what my daughter wanted. What right do you have to ask anything else? That he turned and walked out of Qingshan Temple without a second glance. What right do you have? The words hung in the air, adding to the young monk's already pale complexion. He stared after the man, a decision forming in his eyes. He bowed 3 times to the Buddha, then 3 times to his master, then, ignoring the monk's shocked faces, he walked away. The scene shifted. The father walked out of the temple. He glared at the little monk who was right behind him, scoffed, and got into his carriage, which then sped off. The monk's face set, and he started running after it. The carriage picked up speed, but he kept chasing, his body pushed to its limit. Still, he didn't stop. He put one foot in front of the other, just like he did when chanting sutras, over and over. Everyone watching held their breath. The monk looked ready to collapse, but he kept after the carriage as it threatened to disappear. Then, as if on purpose, the carriage slowed, moving at a pace the monk could almost manage to keep up with. Finally, the carriage stopped. Qi Xiu's father got out. Looking at the little monk, who was clearly at the end of his rope, he sighed and began to speak. Qi Xiu hadn't died of an illness. Not exactly. She told the monk 6 months ago that she was going to be married, not because she'd found love, it was because a prince from a powerful kingdom was forcing her into it, threatening to attack her country if she refused. There were so many small kingdoms in Kyushu like hers, always relying on bigger ones for protection. Faced with the demands of this overlord, even her father, the king, was powerless. She had hoped the monk would agree to marry her instead. She would have defied her father to be with him, but when she asked him, the monk turned away and left. Devastated, she agreed to the marriage, but she asked for a year-long engagement. She was waiting for the monk, waiting for him to save her. Only 6 months later, the prince, unable to restrain himself any longer, tried to force himself on her. Knowing she couldn't fight him, she grabbed a pair of scissors and stabbed herself in the heart. The blood poured out, staining her plain white dress crimson, like a bright red wedding gown. The prince, realizing his mistake, fled back to his own country, but it was too late. She was gone. The little monk didn't respond. Finally, he looked up at the grieving father and said, each word carefully weighed. Can I see Qi Xiu? Yes. Seeing the determination in the monk's eyes, Qi Xiu's father sighed and then said. Qi Xiu's last wish was to be buried near Qingshan Temple. Come with me. He knew what his daughter wanted. When he had looked at the monk after she died, he was filled with disappointment and left without a word. Now, seeing his persistence, he relented and shared her final wish. Soon, the monk stood over Miss Xiu once again. She lay peacefully in her coffin, holding a pink letter. On the envelope, in elegant handwriting, the words "Little Monk" were written. He gently picked up the letter, opened it, and found a short story, a story the monk knew by heart. Once upon a time, there was an old monk who was always being robbed. One day, the thief came again. The monk said to him, "Reach your hand under the door, and I'll give you whatever you want." The thief was happy to hear that and put his hand under the door. The monk grabbed it, tied it to a pillar, and beat him with a stick. As he hit him, he shouted, "Take refuge in Buddha. Take refuge in Dharma. Take refuge in Sangha." The thief was in terrible pain and cried out, "Take refuge in Buddha. Take refuge in Dharma. Take refuge in Sangha. Take refuge in Buddha. Take refuge in Dharma. Take refuge in Sangha. Take refuge, Shio girl. Chapter 44 Buddha saved me, but not her. The scene faded. Qingshan Temple. The little monk had returned. Every monk in the temple, including his master, had come to greet him. His deep understanding of Buddhism had marked him as the next abbot. His absence had been a great loss. His return brought joy to everyone. Amitabha, standing before Qingshan Temple, the monk's master looked at him, a tinge of sadness in the monk's eyes. He softly chanted a Buddhist prayer. All things are caused by fate. All things are caused by fate, and they end when fate ends. How can you become a Buddha if you cling to desire? That the old monk felt at peace. The little monk had grasped the core of Buddhism, and he was only one thought away from reaching enlightenment. Amitabha. Good, good. The monks gathered around, bowing in respect, smiling as if celebrating his rebirth. The word love. If he let go of love, he would no longer have earthly worries. His understanding of Buddha would only grow stronger. Amitabha. The sound of chanting filled the air, resonating through the golden list and into the ears of everyone in Kyushu. For a moment, everyone was silent. Had the monk given up so easily? A wave of anger washed over everyone. Their hearts ached for Miss Shio. Poor Miss Shio. Even as she died, she was thinking of the monk, asking to be buried near the temple. How could the monk be so heartless, so focused on chanting and ringing the bell? Great master. What a joke. He couldn't even protect the woman he loved. All he can do is chant sutras. What a cold-blooded creep. Insults poured in from across Kyushu. They knew he was probably the hidden master sweeping the floors at Shaolin Temple. So what? Was he going to slaughter all of Kyushu for hurting his feelings? This was only the 5th spot on the list. There were at least 4 stronger masters above him. What was there to be afraid of? The curses didn't stop. The heavenly Tao golden list picked up the anger, amplifying the curses for everyone to hear. This only fueled the rage. After all, it was a rare chance to badmouth a great master without worrying about consequences. Was he going to reach through the heavenly Tao golden list and stop them? Of course, there were a few voices of reason, pointing out that the monk hadn't even started training in martial arts yet, and was completely powerless, but these voices were drowned out by the endless stream of insults. Shaolin Temple, the monks, hearing the curses, glanced nervously at the sweeping monk, afraid he might suddenly lash out. They knew that even if he couldn't defeat them across the heavenly Tao golden list, they would have to deal with him personally. Chapter 38. You are listening at novelfull.audio. He could wipe Shaolin off the map. Luckily, the Shaolin monk's worst fears didn't come to pass. The sweeping monk simply listened to the people of Kyushu hurl their insults, saying nothing. He just stared blankly into space, lost in thought. Above, the scene played on. Become a Buddha. The young monk barely lifted his head to address the old monk, speaking slowly and deliberately. The Buddha said, if you empty yourself of all earthly things, you can overcome all hardship. Is that true? Compassionate deliverance. Hearing this, the old monk was taken aback and instinctively replied. Of course it's true. Now the old monk looked troubled. The young monk's state of mind felt wrong, even alarming. The Buddha said suffering isn't suffering, and happiness isn't happiness. It's just a temporary obsession. If you get hung up on one idea, you'll be trapped by it. If you can't let go. The old monk involuntarily invoked the Buddha's name, continuing. If you let it go, you can overcome it through Buddha. But clinging to one idea will only lead to bad karma. The old monk was spouting the most profound truths from the Buddhist scriptures. Only now did the people of Kyushu realize that this usually unremarkable old monk possessed incredibly deep Buddhist teachings. He was easily on par with some of the most famous monks in Kyushu. Soon, the angry shouts from Kyushu began to die down. They also realized that, given the young monk's situation, what could he possibly do against the prince? Avenge the showgirl? Even her powerful father couldn't pull that off. What could a little novice monk do? Maybe it was best to just let it go. The old monk's words echoed in everyone's minds, prompting them to reflect. Yes. What was the point of dwelling on it and letting it consume you? Let it go. Gradually, the abuse coming from Kyushu faded away. Instead, voices of encouragement rose up. Even though everyone knew this was the past, they couldn't help but urge the young monk to move on. Back in Shaolin Temple, the sweeping monk remained calm and detached, as if worldly matters didn't concern him. Over into Qin. That poor monk is having a rough time. Looking at the image on the Heavenly Tao gold list, Yingyun shook his head, a touch of helplessness crossing his face, and he said softly. That dynasty is a pretty strong mid-sized power. What can one little monk do? Throughout the Kyushu continent, the dynasty was always king. The reason emperors tried to recruit powerful individuals on the peerless lists was just for self-preservation, to avoid easy assassination. Ultimately, the fate of a dynasty was determined by war. Assassination was a second-rate tactic. A little monk was truly powerless. Really? Hearing this, Yingyun hesitated, his eyes fixed on the silent young monk on the gold list, and he shook his head. Something told him that this little monk wouldn't give up so easily. Just then, the Heavenly Tao gold list zoomed in, providing a clearer view of what had happened below Qingshan Temple. After hearing what the old monk said, the young monk was silent for a long time. He suddenly looked up at the old monk and said seriously. Buddha saves me. Then why didn't he save her? The little monk's voice was soft, no hysteria, just a deathly quiet. The Buddha said, overcome all hardship. If you let go of earthly desires, you can become a Buddha. But why did the Buddha only save me, and not her? Boom! As soon as these words were uttered, Qingshan Temple and all of Kyushu fell silent. Why? Chapter 45 If the Buddha doesn't save you, then I will become a demon. Buddha saved me, but why didn't he save her? A faint voice echoed, no hysteria, no madness, just the doubts that had arisen from chanting Buddhist scriptures every day for over 10 years. Why? The Buddhist scriptures say if you empty yourself of all earthly things, you can overcome all hardship. Then why is a Shio dead? Where was the Buddha then? Amitabha. Hearing this, the old monk was startled. He hadn't expected the young monk to ask such a question. Should he have saved her or not? The breeze rustled through the ancient trees nearby, and fallen leaves spun gently between the young monk and the old monk, causing small ripples. Silence. All of Qingshan Temple was silent. Only the little monk's question hung in the air, tinged with sadness and confusion. He didn't understand what Buddha truly was. Everything is preordained. Looking at the young monk, the old monk sighed softly and explained. A Shio's life was destined to achieve enlightenment and obtain Buddha's true form in the next life. As he spoke, the old monk shook his head, knowing the young monk wouldn't listen to him. He turned to leave. Preordained? Hearing the old monk's words, the young monk laughed bitterly, tears streaming down his face, his laughter full of despair. He put his hands together, giving a Buddhist salute to the old monk, then turned and left. And so, the old monk and the young monk walked away from each other, their figures gradually growing distant. The little monk never returned to Qingshan Temple, but not far from Qingshan Temple, on the hill where the little monk used to chant sutras, a new grave appeared. Engraved clearly on the tombstone were the words, "Here lies my wife, Shio." The letters were neatly inscribed, done with great care, and in front of the grave, a little monk lay collapsed on the ground, a wine gourd tossed aside. I take refuge in the Buddha, I take refuge in the Dharma, I take refuge in the Sangha, I take refuge in Shio. Lost in a drunken dream, the little monk murmured in his sleep, a smile on his face, yet tears in his eyes. If it weren't for the unique 3 refuges, no one would recognize this little monk. It had only been 3 days since he'd left Qingshan Temple, but the little monk whom everyone had once admired had become a wreck. He had even forgotten the Buddhist precepts against drinking. Judging by the empty wine gourds scattered nearby, it was clear what he'd been up to. What a pitiful sight. Looking at the little monk's appearance, the angry clamoring of Kyushu suddenly ceased. A trace of sympathy flashed in everyone's eyes. They could see the little monk's love for Shio, but she was gone, and he could only drink to drown his sorrows. The Buddha doesn't save you, Buddha. At that moment, the little monk started muttering, as if having a nightmare, and suddenly woke up, his clothes soaked with cold sweat. "Buddha, why didn't you save her?" After waking up, the little monk gently stroked the word Shio on the tombstone, and murmured softly. "If the Buddha doesn't save you, what's the point of me worshipping the Buddha? What's the point?" A hint of hysterical madness crept into the little monk's once clear eyes. He roared. His voice carried the desperate cry of a wounded animal. He regretted it. If he had promised Shio in the first place, what would have happened beneath Qingshan Temple? The rules and regulations: don't kill, don't steal, don't commit adultery, don't lie, don't drink, don't wear perfume, don't sit or lie on a high and wide bed, don't eat non-food, rules and regulations. The little monk had prided himself on strictly adhering to them. But the reward he received was Shio's death. Chapter 39. You are listening at novelfull.audio. What's the point of worshipping a Buddha like that? Boom! The little monk's roar shook the sky. Dark clouds rolled in, blanketing everything in shadow. Boom! Thunder cracked, as if the monk's words had angered the heavens themselves. Rain poured down. Ha ha ha! The little monk laughed, wild and unrestrained in the downpour. Mud stained his robe, tears mingling with the rain, blurring together. Buddha won't save you. Then I'll become a demon. Boom. As he shouted, a vast power surged from the little monk's body, defying the heavens. Acquired. Innate. Third-rate master. Second-rate master. First-rate master. In the blink of an eye, the little monk shattered boundaries countless people only dreamed of, ascending to become a first-rate master. A first-rate master was no weakling in Jojo. Without a grandmaster, a first-rate master was at the peak. Even in the Supreme Dynasty, a first-rate master could land a cushy job, wealth and honor theirs for the taking. And in smaller dynasties, they were practically worshipped. Now, this little monk, in a moment, had become a first-rate master. Everyone in Jojo watching was stunned. This kind of breakthrough was unbelievable. Click. Just as everyone trembled, shocked by the scene, a soft sound rippled out, seeming to come from the little monk's body. Instantly, the rain stopped, as if frozen in place, the downpour hung suspended in the air. The little monk roared, unleashing a torrent of true energy, ready to wipe out the world. Grandmaster, a grandmaster. Seeing the little monk's current state, countless dynasties in Jojo were shocked, then terrified. The power now radiating from him was nearly identical to that of a grandmaster. Was he about to become a grandmaster? If his leap to first-rate master was enough to stun and horrify people, this left them speechless. Who could believe that a little monk, who'd only known how to ring bells and chant scriptures, could ascend to the grandmaster realm in an instant? Becoming a grandmaster was a lifelong pursuit for countless people in Jojo, a goal few even caught a glimpse of. And he just broke through like that? Rumble. The whole of Jojo was reeling, finding it hard to believe. But the image on the heavenly Tao confirmed it. This was real. Grandmaster. Everyone's hearts trembled. In theory, a grandmaster was supposed to be calm, peaceful, someone who understood the futility of the world. That's why they were called grandmasters. Admired by all, they were supposed to be role models. But someone becoming a grandmaster through demonic means, their evil spirit shattering their limits, that was unimaginable. An existence like that should be called a demon. One thought Buddha, one thought demon. A grandmaster transformed from Buddha to demon. Chapter 46. Now, I will break the killing calamity again. One thought to grandmaster. This scene defied everyone's expectations in Jojo. Who could have imagined that this peaceful monk, who'd only ever chanted scripture, could become this powerful? This little monk was a genius. All of Jojo agreed. But when he abandoned his cultivation, only to chant sutras and Buddha's name every day, everyone forgot his talent. They figured even if he was a genius, he wouldn't amount to much. Some even speculated he'd stumbled upon a secret or, like Zhang Sanfeng, trained day and night to reach the grandmaster level. But now, everyone was speechless. This little monk truly embodied the meaning of genius. What's he going to do? Cries of shock came from all over Jojo. Everyone looked up at the Tiandao golden list. Only to be stunned. The rainstorm had stopped, but the little monk was gone from beside Miss Xiu's grave. Only a wine gourd remained, swaying in the breeze, a few drops of wine scattering, crystal clear, onto a small white flower. Tap! The little flower swayed gently. Jojo was stunned. Soon, the heavenly Tao golden list flickered, showing the little monk again. Some time had passed, he wore his muddy robe, smelling of alcohol. He walked out of Green Mountain and into town. Little monk, where are you off to? Seeing the disheveled monk, someone teased him. After all, after so many years in Green Mountain Town, everyone knew the monk who rang the bell and chanted Buddha in Green Mountain Temple. Seeing his clothes and drunk appearance, they naturally wanted to tease him. If they knew they were teasing a grandmaster, they'd be terrified. Amitba. This poor monk is going to Ningguo. Ningguo was the middling dynasty of the prince who forced Xiu to her death. Ningguo. That's hundreds of miles away. The man was taken aback, asking. What are you going to do? Did your master kick you off the mountain? A young monk traveling thousands of miles to another dynasty, still looking like that. People started to wonder. Even those who were just watching gathered around, offering their opinions. Some advised the young monk to apologize to the old monk quickly. Others asked why he was going to Ningguo. Everyone had their own theories. But most were just watching for entertainment. After all, in these boring times, teasing a runaway monk was amusing. Amitba, the monk remained calm. He solemnly bowed to the person who pointed him towards Ningguo, then said. This poor monk is traveling alone. Step. He ignored their shocked faces, turned, and headed towards Ningguo. For one person, everyone was stunned, then started chattering. That little monk's got some fire in him, someone shouted. Laughter erupted from the crowd. They figured this monk was definitely lovesick to travel all the way to Ningguo. But compared to the scene on the Tiandao golden list, everyone in Jojo was much more solemn. Ningguo. There were so many dynasties in Jojo that most people didn't know much about this country. But they knew that this dynasty was in trouble. Being targeted by a grandmaster was never good. Time passed. Ningguo. 10 days later, the young monk appeared in the capital of Ning Kingdom. Ningcheng. After days of walking, he was covered in dust. He no longer looked handsome, but more like a walking monk. Chapter 40. You are listening at novelfull.audio. What a twist of fate. The young monk had just arrived in Ningcheng when he ran into the prince, who was out for a stroll. This prince of Ningguo, having seemingly completely forgotten about Xiu, the girl he'd driven to her death, was swaggering through the streets like nothing had happened. He was bullying everyone in sight, men and women alike, with an arrogant swagger. The people on the street scattered in terror at the sight of him. The once bustling streets quickly fell silent as everyone avoided the prince like the plague. Everyone, that is, except for one person, the little monk. He saw the arrogant prince, chanted a quick Buddhist prayer, and said softly, "Hey, remember Miss Xiu?" The little monk's voice was calm, without a hint of threat. The prince immediately locked onto him. What, Xiu girl? He sneered. Never heard of her. Get out of my way. Looking down at the young monk, the prince smirked, raising his hand to shove him aside. It was then that people across Jojo realized that this prince from a small kingdom was actually a master martial artist. But judging by his clumsy technique, it was no wonder he'd only achieved such a mediocre level. Amitba. Seeing the prince before him, a shadow of grief crossed the little monk's face. He raised his hand slightly, and a master's aura radiated out, stopping the prince dead in his tracks. A master versus a would-be master. It was no contest, a total mismatch. The prince froze, dumbfounded. How could a random little monk possess such incredible power? Buddhist monks vow not to indulge in love or alcohol. The little monk's eyes were cold as he stared at the trembling prince, his voice flat. Today, I break my vow against killing, *crack, star. A surge of true energy flowed from the little monk's palm. The prince was helpless. After a brief struggle, he was dead, and so, the arrogant prince who had driven Miss Xiao to her death lay dead on the street. Pathetic, even in his final moments, he couldn't understand why this little monk had killed him. Miss Xiao, star. The little monk's question echoed in his ears as his consciousness faded. Vaguely, it sounded familiar, but it was too late to think about it. His consciousness completely vanished. The prince's guards, who had witnessed everything, were in shock. They couldn't believe anyone would dare to kill their young master in Ningcheng. Without hesitation, they raced off to get help. Soon, countless armored soldiers swarmed the area and surrounded the little monk. Chapter 47, Grandmaster Showdown. The little monk's might. A storm was brewing in Ningcheng. The current ruler of Ningwa only had one heir, the prince. Now, the prince was dead in the street. This was huge news for all of Ningwa. Almost instantly, the entire city of Ningcheng was locked down. Grandmasters were powerful, that much was true. But even the strongest could be worn down in a drawn-out fight. Amitabha. All living beings suffer. I will deliver you from this earthly hell. The little monk remained calm as he looked at the soldiers surrounding him. His words, however, stunned everyone. The soldiers were just soldiers. They didn't know the little monk's history. But people from all over Jiuzhou had watched this little monk grow up. Never stepping on ants, cherishing moths with gauze lamps, that this perfectly described the little monk of the past. He chanted scriptures, recited Buddhist teachings. Even when he left Qingshan Temple, he was kind and gentle. In Qingshan town, people might have teased him, but there was no real malice. In fact, many urged him to return to the temple, and now, this little monk had changed completely. He moved. With a flick of his hand, a wave of true energy sent dozens of charging soldiers flying. The little monk had no martial arts techniques, relying instead on his master-level internal energy to push back his attackers. But a master was a force to be reckoned with. Even without special techniques, a few hundred soldiers were no match for him. Wails of pain echoed throughout the street. A grandmaster. He's a grandmaster. Fear gripped someone and they retreated in terror. Grandmaster. Those two words were a nightmare for ordinary people. Even well-trained soldiers trembled and instinctively feared their opponent upon hearing the title of Grandmaster. What are you afraid of? Just as fear began to spread and the soldiers started to retreat, a commanding voice boomed through the air. Another Grandmaster. The Emperor of Ningwa stepped forward, radiating an aura of power. Grandmaster. As his terrifying aura spread, the entire Jiuzhou was in shock. The Emperor of Ning was actually a powerful Grandmaster. The Qin Dynasty. A Grandmaster. Ding Zheng's eyes narrowed as he watched the screen, a hint of surprise in his voice. In this middle-tier dynasty, the Emperor is actually a Grandmaster. In all of Jiuzhou, powerful Grandmasters were rare and highly sought after. How could such a small country possess one? Your Majesty, I have investigated and confirmed the existence of the Ning Kingdom. It's a remote dynasty to the west of Qin. Li Si stepped forward, bowing deeply to Yingyun, and said in a solemn tone, however, it's unlike other dynasties. The Ning Kingdom rose to power with incredible speed. I suspect they relied on this Grandmaster to forcibly annex other small dynasties and create a mid-tier dynasty. In the lands of Jiuzhou, a Grandmaster could conquer territory, establish a supreme force, or even found a dynasty. However, most Grandmasters were indifferent by nature. Even with the power, they wouldn't bother with such things. Of course, Jiuzhou was vast, and there were always a few eccentric Grandmasters. The founder of Ning Kingdom must have been one of them. This will be a tough fight. Guy Nia looked up at the Dao gold list, his voice grim. As a master swordsman himself, he could tell that the Ningwa Grandmaster was far from a beginner. The little monk, on the other hand, had only just achieved master status, and most importantly, he knew no special techniques. He could handle the soldiers with his true energy, but against a more experienced grandmaster in the same realm, the young monk would definitely be at a disadvantage. And while Ningguo might have a small army, it still numbered in the tens of thousands. Tens of thousands of soldiers might not be able to kill a grandmaster, but they would definitely be a problem. Not only the Qin, but almost the entire 9 provinces was stunned by the sudden appearance of a powerful grandmaster. Even the supreme dynasties didn't have many such powerhouses. In wars between dynasties, military strength was the deciding factor. A grandmaster couldn't single-handedly win a war. But no one dared underestimate a grandmaster. To do so would come at a heavy price. Just as Jojo was reeling from the news, the scene changed, showing the young monk and the Ningguo grandmaster about to face off.